Välkommen to Fulfilling This Belly Sting. A show dedicated to aligning a journey to a better mental health using the understandings of the ancient Norse. Join us each weekday morning at 7 a.m. Alaska time. Someone's little girl, daughter, sister, girlfriend, fiance, wife, cousin, mother, auntie, grandmother, great grandmother, elder, disappears, shattering, a family, a community, the world. There is something we can all do. Remember them. Like that.
God Morgen, and happy Money's Day to you. Today we celebrate the Norse god Mani, who was omnipresent in his role as the moon. Opposite of his sister Sol, he offered us a balance and an understanding that the intellect provided to us during the day and the illumination during Sol's time in the sky presented us with the opportunity to then question it, to drive that dark energy of the evening and actually further drive us to learn more, to grow, to evolve. So a wonderful balance he brought to our understanding of this everyday life or everyday experience we call reality. So today, as we begin a new work week, let's talk about how that kind of plays into our everyday thinking, because it's absolutely critical that we understand our role in our trajectory through life. Before we get started today, I want to say thank you to all of you who have liked, followed, and subscribed. And if you haven't had a chance yet, please do so. You can do so at any of our platforms that this show is available on, whether it be the video platform, TikTok, Facebook, YouTube, Streamlabs, whatever, or whether it be the audio at Apple, Spotify, iHeartRadio, all of those. You can check out any and all. And if that's not enough, you can also check out my friends and family at New Reality TV. newrealitytv.com is a streaming channel dedicated to understanding our spiritual journey, offering us a plethora of perspectives as to our growth and evolution through this physical lifetime. For you who may have a few extra coins, by all means, feel free to hit up our tip jar. That links are located at the beginning of the show and the end of the show. You can always check those out there at pay.akoutlaw.com. For you who are maybe interested more about me, my message, my teachings, and certainly asking questions and learning more about the shows, you can always check out NorseWhispers.com. There you'll also find a link to my life coaching service, which hopefully can offer you an ear to bend, maybe another opinion to help you find that intellect that you need to obtain or maintain your mental space. Today's online chat available on Facebook and on TikTok. So if you have those questions and comments, by all means, feel free to throw them in the chat. Today we're talking about the Norse god Mani. And the Norse god Mani was simply the opposite of his sister Sol. He brought a balance to the world. Now, from a physical reality perspective, he would have brought the cooler temperatures of the evening, right? So Sol, his sister, the sun, would have brought the sunlight and the heat of the day. And then, ultimately, as she began to lay her weary head upon her bed, and Mani would begin to rise, and as Mani began to rise, of course, the temperatures would drop from that midday sun to the evening lows. He also brought around this thing called dark energy. Well, what is dark energy? Dark energy is simply unilluminated. It's not negative. It's not evil. It's not bad. It's nothing like that. It's simply unknown. We just don't know what's in it. And it's not until we illuminate it that we could see the richness of this energy particle. They happen, they're equal and opposite parts. So when we get illumination from the gods or from the spirits or from other entities, as that energy is brought into the self, we find that if we have, a couple of particles of light energy, we have an equal and opposite number of dark energy particles. These dark energy particles offer us the opportunity then to question what we just learned. So when we send our questions, our intrinsic questions to the universe, we're simply sending this dark energy out to the spiritual realm to be illuminated. So we're kind of directing the illumination following that back to us. So we're in control. Or we can simply say, "Nyeh," and let it ride and not pay any attention to it. And ultimately we'll wind up illuminating it anyway in some form or another. But that decision, whether we decide to illuminate or not, is completely on us. No one else. We get to make the choice. We choose whether we're going to investigate something more, or we're just going to kind of let it fill the coffers. We can do either or, but we have a choice. And a lot of people have surrendered that choice. They've kind of given it up. They've said, well, I'll just, whatever happens to me happens, and so on. And they're willing to do that. So it's more of a victim type of mentality from the very beginning. There are also many people at this point who are beginning to question it. Why? When the self-reveal, roughly about, well, it's been a while now. It's been over a decade, almost two, where I started questioning. I was ordained for those of you who don't know, I was ordained as a minister in a Christian church back in 2001. And I served a long time, about 10 years, as a chaplain for motorcycle clubs, for first responders, for military. But I was questioning the doctrine. I questioned everything. I didn't want to accept anything from a spiritual perspective blindly. So I needed to ask questions. Why is this that way? Why is this that way? Whenever we think of our spiritual beliefs and their impact on our everyday lives, I draw our attention to the two major pieces that we really seek when we're looking for something to believe in. The first thing is it has to make sense. Believing in giants is all well and good, and I do, but then I have to understand why, how can giants even be? How can they rule whatever they do, right? How can they do what they do? How can they be the way they are? And so you question it. Okay? Well, we know, based on just reality or what we've experienced, we know that there are individuals with whom could be considered giants. They are the wonderful men and of maybe the NHL or the NFL, these basketball players, these men predominantly, and there are many women who are very, very tall. Not a bad thing. Matter of fact, a wonderful thing. Completely different perspective. And it's wonderful, I would imagine. I'm not one of those people. I'm rather shorter in stature, but nonetheless, seeing a different perspective would be wonderful. So all of a sudden, this doctrine, this or this ideology, or this idea that there could be people even taller than that, now all of a sudden kind of starts to make sense. Could it be? Absolutely. When you see some of the wonderful examples of lives around this planet that we live on, you can see where, quite honestly, yeah, that kind of makes sense. It could happen. So we begin to fill in the blanks, and this is really a matter of using that dark energy, sending it out to the universe, and receiving the information back. Now, in my case, I simply said, well, could giants exist? And yes, giants could exist. For we know, even in the Christian Bible, there are notes about these larger figures, these, giants, if you will. I draw our attention to the story of Goliath and David and Goliath. A giant. There he is. So we really see that, yes, this could be a piece of the equation. When we begin to look at all of our beliefs that way, and we begin to question it, could this be? Does it make sense? Right? Why would people throughout history do this certain thing, a certain ritual or event, if they didn't believe? Well, does it make sense? If it makes sense, then lo and behold. But the second part was really just as important as that is, does it feel right? Right? So when I made my transition away from the Christian church, I really looked at that as being a big thing. Does it feel right? If in all of my utterances and my speaking and all the studies I did, as I read these things, did it feel right? And it took some intuition, so I had to be very intrinsic in my look at all of this data and say, does this feel right, and does it make sense? If our belief or our understanding meets those two criteria, chances are you're in the right ballpark. Okay? Granted, you're going to learn more, you're going to grow more, you're going to evolve more, you're going to see more. But most importantly, you're in a pretty close space. You're pretty close to what your ancestors are telling you is the reality of this lifetime. It's very simple. It really is. And it's only when we begin to accept a shame from other people, we accept shame can be in the form of ridicule, can be in the form of just flat, out and out shame or guilt, in very much the same way that we've read through the history books, or the better history books, I should say, about how Europeans pretty much conquered the Americas. It was pretty much a shame, guilt, kind of blame thing that brought, unfortunately, a lot of death and a lot of problems to those who didn't subscribe to that belief system. I have said, and I will always say, that one of the ways that modern monotheist practices came to be in the level of influence that they've had throughout the millennia is conform or die. a conform or die mentality. And we really see this demonstrated very clearly as European settlers moved west. It was really a conform or die kind of mentality to accept this belief, whether they did or not. And again, did it make sense? Did it feel right? And when both of those things were wrong or not meeting, and yet they were still forced to do that, yeah, that's kind of where things fell off the rails, as far as I'm concerned anyway. So we really have to question that which we know. There's no givens. There's no, oh, somebody gave me this intellect, and this intellect is that's it, man. Carve that stuff in concrete. That's not reality. Reality is we should look at each piece of our belief system, each piece of our lives, each piece of our values, and evaluate as things change. One of the things that I am constantly studying, because it really intrigues me, is this idea that you and I are changing at a DNA level as we go throughout our lives. You, each of us, is taken or constructed from a snapshot of mom's DNA and dad's DNA, put them together, and poof, lo and behold, there you are. As soon as that DNA is formed, called you, you're beginning to change it, and you're changing it through chemistry. Now, we've spoken about this on many occasions when we think about the thought process, because the thought process is about 40% done with biochemistry, not bioelectricity. All right, so when we're thinking and we're watching, I should say, when we're watching and we're experiencing our reality, whether it be through our visual, our audio, smells, tastes, or even our touch, we're experiencing reality. We're bringing that thing, that event, into our minds, and we're converting it to bioelectricity. That bioelectricity is then passed through a couple of filters, and we've spoken about those before, where it's then dropped to the heart. The heart then evaluates that energy, whatever it is, and creates biochemistry. Biochemistry is then released into the bloodstream. That bloodstream pumps back up to the brain. The brain then recognizes the biochemistry and converts it back to bioelectricity. But it's this composition of this biochemistry that is really interesting. That's the word we'll use. It's really interesting because it can mean a whole lot of different things, right? So, and our brains are trained to build what I call the recipe card, which is where I look at this chemical composition that just arrived in my brain, and I look it up on this list that I've built throughout my lifetime of what I should feel. Super important, because it tells me, hey, based on this chemical composition, I should feel this, whatever this is. Now, this is a really good indicator of my previous experiences. So I'm looking at my past here to determine what I should feel moving forward. All right. So super important that we're building that card. And this is our teenage years, our younger years, primary school, and on into certainly the high school years, and even into our low college. I consider us building some emotional knowledge, intellect, if you will, all the way up until the fact that we're probably 30, maybe even older, right? So we're never going to be a specialist or a master in this kind of emotional management. So that happens much later in our lives. This is the wisdom that we're talking about, in emotional wisdom. So super important. All right, I want to take a real quick break, and when I come back, we're going to talk about how you can use this knowledge that we've just given you to begin to set your own path. Remember, we're in charge. We're the drivers, nothing else. So you get to take control, and you get to understand how and where we get to make decisions as to how we're going to feel and how we're going to move forward. So let's take a real quick commercial break, and we'll be right back after that.
In the air. The time is now.
We're all waking up.
We're waking up.
We're all waking up.
It's all shifting.
New vibrations.
It's you.
It's you.
It's me. It's all of us.
Together.
A new time.
A new day.
A new energy.
A new energy.
New reality.
Awaken with us.
Awaken with us.
Awaken with us.
newrealitytv.com.
Welcome back, and thank you for taking that quick break with me. And once again, just calling out all my friends and family there at New Reality TV. You will not be disappointed. Check them out if you get the chance. So today we're talking about money, and we're talking about controlling our destiny, controlling our trajectory through this lifetime by understanding the path. So the first step in whenever we're deciding to begin our journey and take control is we got to understand how far we're out of control, right? We got to understand where we are. So this is the process, and I guess the modern day term is baselining, right? We're going to understand where we are. Well, some of the critical keys that we're going to be looking at for this exercise is really, what are our values? Because they're going to affect every decision we make. Every decision is going to be based on your emotional values. Now, my ancestors referred to this as the well of the self. And at the bottom of the well of the self was a collection of a beautiful kaleidoscope, rather, of rocks. And these rocks were placed in the well by us and others with whom we've given some level of authority. And they possess the values that we have: honor, integrity, courage, strength. All of these things are all kind of put into a design on the floor, if you will, of this well of the self. Now, these rocks are given to us. Most of them are given to us originally, but then we simply have to look at them and evaluate them. Is this something that suits our needs, that we want, right? So when we think about things like generational emotional states, so I'm always reminded in my own personal life, my father and his father were very abusive in their nature, not because they were evil or anything like that, but that was their expectations. So my father's father probably received it from his father, and he was very strict or stern, and they issued corporal punishment for everything. And so it was the way they grew up. And so they passed it to my father. My father, of course, being a very abusive, particularly when he was drunk, very abusive man. And that was the way he considered, life. That was what he did. That was how he was supposed to act. When he, infused me with this value of violence to obtain, what we wanted, our superiority, if you will, as parents, I could have taken that and run with it and said, yep, my kids are going to be the same way. They're going to be this, that. Or, as I did, I could choose otherwise and say, no, they don't need that. What they need is love. They need to be held. They need to be, not coddled, obviously, but we want to make sure that they know they're loved and they're safe. And that's the benefit, right? And so I chose to take that rock out of my well, pitch that one to the roadside, and say, no, I'm not going to carry that value. Or if we have a generational scenario where potentially we have racism or sexism, something of that nature, we have a choice as to whether we're going to take that rock out of our well or leave it in there. We have that choice. This is the value system that we hold dear. Now, we should constantly be looking at this value system that we have to determine if it's still applicable. One set of rules may apply to our lives before we find our shield maidens or our partners in life, right? So we should be able to look at our lives and go, okay, we have a set of values that don't include being vulnerable and open to your significant other, right? So, because we're out playing the field, we don't need that interrupting, right? Once we find the one, all of a sudden our values change, right? And it's a fact of life. Also, we'll find as we age, our values are changing, okay? Right? Because we're going to find different things that are of value. Maybe the quest to know more about how we think. It becomes more important as we get older. Maybe we just don't want to do as much, right? And we're trying to kind of minimize what we're doing. Great. We're learning, we're growing, we're evolving. So for us to start our emotional, spiritual, intellectual journey, or more importantly, to recognize it, the first thing we're going to do is we're going to do this baseline. We need to understand where we are, what we think today. What I typically do, and I've done throughout my life, particularly along my shamanic journey, is I've made notes of these. So I ask myself questions. Well, what do we believe about this? And I'll write down the answers. And then 5 years goes by and I'll look back at that answer and go, wow, man, I can see now where I've illuminated myself as time has passed. So journaling becomes super important. And I know everyone I've ever spoke to says, "Ooh, don't make me write." You've got to. Make notes of your life. This is how we can see, we can witness our evolution in thoughts and emotions, and certainly the spirit is making notes of our journey. Now, do you have to write it down as you're doing it and this, that? No, there's no formality to it, all right? This is about you. It's about you learning who you are and why you are the way you are, right? So we can see these values and we can say, oh, well, let's see, my dad kind of thought that way, or my mom thought that way, or maybe grandma or grandpa, or I remember a second grade teacher who thought that way, right? And so we begin to see who we're giving this authority to, right? This level of authority. And that begins to then question, well, should we have given that authority? And does that authority hold water? Is that authority still valid? Is this point still valid? And so all of these things can be done as we're evaluating each of our value systems. And this is just simply asking ourselves questions, making notes so that we can refer back to them. All right. So it's a critical piece. And I think it can really benefit us as our evolution can truly begin to be recognized for what it is. Now, as always, I recommend that we begin to look at those values, those cornerstones that we have, through the process of intrinsic reflection, or meditation as it's called. But when we begin to just kind of close out our sensory input and begin to reflect intrinsically as to what we're feeling, what we're thinking, what's driving this, we're going to be able to pull out those values and figure out which ones we want to keep and which ones we don't. Remember, these rocks are going to be processed by every thought you have. Every experience we have in this physical lifetime is going to process through those stones. How do we want to emit energy? How do we want to be seen extrinsically? And what's important to us? You know, is being in a crowd, is being part of this particular community, is that important? Does that have value? And is that value superseding some other values that may be more important? So we're being asked to lie to be part of this community. Our honor, inclusion. Right? So we're going to really be able to understand where we stand in a lot of different things and then decide who we want to be. When we decide who we want to be, now we're starting to take control of our growth, of the values, of our memories, of our spiritual connection, and certainly the process of seeing the world around us. It then puts all of that control in our hands. So the question is, who do you want to be? Remember also that no one is wrong in the way they want to be. The only, I would say, the only burr in that saddle, if you will, would be when our values supersede someone else's, and there's no desire for harmony. There's desire for superiority. That's when things are falling off the rails, and we should have to go back and evaluate our own personal goals, right? We should never need to change someone else for us to have value in ourselves. We should never need to do that, right? So, and even here today, as I speak to you, hopefully, in a way that you understand, I don't feel a need to change you. My goal is to provide you with illumination and for you to determine what, if any, you're going to use in your life. But ultimately, I recognize your decision to make for you, independent of me. You're on a different journey. You're on a different path than me. And that's fine. That's wonderful, as a matter of fact, because I'd love to hear about your journey. I'd love to understand it. I'd love to be able to witness it through your eyes. Why? Because it's a different perspective. It's a different view than my life. But it doesn't mean that your experiences are going to change mine. It just means we've had two different experiences to learn the same thing. So we really have to get away from, inclusion over everything else. Remember your authentic space, and you'll be far advanced, far moving towards where you want to be and what you want to do. All right. So today we're celebrating Mani's Day. I remember our exercise, our ongoing exercise of finding things throughout our day that brings us joy, that brings us peace and harmony and contentment and comfort and just pure unadulterated peace and joy. Finding those things, actively seeking them. Don't look for the bad things. Don't just ignore them. But look for the good things. Look for the positive. Look for the excitement. Look for the thrill. All right? And stop beating yourself up with the bad things in this experience. Because they're going to be out there, no doubt. But you have a choice. And you can make that choice to see whatever you want to see. So, choose joy. Choose happiness. Choose peace. I wish you the very best Mani's Day. We will see you again tomorrow for Tuesday. In Tuesday, we speak about our intrinsic courage and where that courage can actually get us onto facing some of those things that we may or may not want to see. Remember, sometimes looking deep inside can bring out some pretty dark memories and energies, and we need to spend some time illuminating them. So just remember, you're not perfect, and that's the way you were designed. You're not supposed to be. No one is. Not even the gods. They're not perfect either, right? So everyone makes mistakes, and so figure out what you learn from it and grow from it. Evolve from it. All right? So enjoy your Mani's Day, and we will see you again tomorrow. And remember, if you do have any questions, hit me up, shaman@akoutlaw.com. There you can actually go to norsewhispers.com as well and ask your questions, and I'll be happy to get a dialogue going with you, and hopefully we can find you an answer that works for you. All right? Have a wonderful Mani's Day, and we will see you again tomorrow. Love and light, my friends.
Been watching for Felina's Belly Snake, a special production of Whispers of the Norse. Brought to you by the Alaska Ulfhefnar in South Central Alaska. Guidance and wisdom, courtesy of an ancient Celtic Norse shaman. Thank you so much for joining us today.